Hello, dear friends. Today we are going to discuss another important and very interesting topic under GST, that is reverse charge mechanism RCM. So the whole video will be a comprehensive guide which will help you to understand how RCM shifts tax liability from supplier to buyer, what are the objectives of RCM, how it is applied, and what are its implications for businesses in India. So now the concept of RCM. That is, what is RCM? So in the earlier taxation system, whenever the supplier supplies goods, the ultimate liability to pay tax to government was of the supplier. But here the charge is reversed. Now, instead of supplier, the recipient becomes liable to pay GST to the government. So, in the regular system, supplier of goods is responsible for collecting GST from the buyer and depositing it with the government. So, like if a shopkeeper sells a product worth rupees 1000 and GST is 18%, he charges the customer 1180 and later deposits 180 with the government. But under RCM, the responsibility of paying GST is reversed. Now here, recipient will be liable to pay tax to government. So, in simple words, RCM shifts the liability from supplier to buyer. In the same way, not only for goods, it is applicable for services also. Now, the main objectives of RCM: first, bringing unorganized sector into tax net. So there were many sectors in India like agriculture, local transport, which are considered unorganized, and sellers are often unregistered under this system. So RCM ensures that when they supply goods or services to the registered buyer, tax still gets collected from the recipient. So, for example, a cotton supplier, that is a farmer is supplying cotton to who is unregistered to the textile mill. In this case, if textile mill is registered, then textile mill will be liable to pay GST to government. Second is making organized buyer responsible for compliance requirements, because because they are unorganized, having small scales, so they cannot meet all the compliance requirements, that is to maintain accountants, auditors, resources to comply with the GST rules. So the big organized sector, they can easily comply with all these requirements, so the responsibility has been shifted to the organized sector. So reducing tax evasion and revenue leakage. Earlier, because some unorganized sectors say that we are unorganized, so moreover our turnover is less, so there is no need of getting registration. So the government says that it leads to tax evasion. So in this case, small suppliers may avoid paying GST due to weak record keeping by shifting liability to the large organized buyer. So the government ensures that tax revenue is not lost. For example, a small truck operator is there who is unregistered. He transports the goods. Okay? Normally, he might not pay GST on the ground that he was unorganized, unregistered. So government loses the revenue. But under RCM, the company who will hire that truck operator is responsible to pay tax. So there will be no evasion and no leakage will be there. Strengthening transparency in GST. So RCM improves the tracking of transactions, reduces black money in the economy. So a company hires a lawyer, pays GST under RCM. This entry gets recorded and government can clearly see the transaction, and it leads to full transparency. Then the cases where RCM is applicable, these are specifically mentioned under the GST Act, that is the supply of certain notified goods. कुछ notified goods specify किए गए हैं जिनके ऊपर if the goods are supplied, then RCM will be applicable. Means the recipient will be liable to pay GST. So these are cashew nuts which are unshelled if they are supplied by the farmers to registered dealer, tendu leaves used for bidi making, tobacco leaves supplied by agriculturalist, raw cotton, farmers supplying to textile mill, silk yarn when supplied by the unregistered person, or old vehicles, lottery tickets, etc. in certain cases. In the same way, supply of some notified services are also there, like good transport agency service. मतलब जब ये लोग services supply करते हैं, then in that case, those who are receiving their services are liable to pay GST. So legal services by advocates, sponsorship services, directors remuneration other than salary, insurance agent commission, security services by non-company agencies, government renting property to the businesses, and moreover, some purchases from unregistered suppliers. If unregistered supplier is supplying goods to the registered recipient, in that case also the registered person will be liable to pay tax under RCM. So if a builder buys construction material from an unregistered dealer, here the builder pays GST under RCM. Then is some examples are there, like good transport agency. Okay, if their services are taken, in that case, recipient pays 2500 directly to the government and not the good transport agency. Okay, legal services. In case of legal services, if the lawyer fees is 1 lakh, GST 18%. In that case, business entity which is getting that legal services from the lawyer is required to pay 18,000 to government, and later on they can claim ITC. There is the key features of reverse charge mechanism. Tax liability is shifted to the recipient automatically. If there is RCM means charge is reversed, then the receiver of goods, recipient is liable to pay GST. So the tax liability is shifted. So if the company is hiring the advocate instead of lawyer charging GST, the company itself pays GST directly to the government. सेकेंड इज अप्लाइज ओनली टू नोटिफाइड गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, जो अभी हमने डिस्कस करे, कुछ नोटिफाइड गुड्स और सर्विसेज है, ये आरसीएम का रूल जो है उन्हीं के ऊपर अप्लाई होता है, लाइक रॉ कॉटन, तेंदू लीव, जीटीए सर्विसेज एक्सेट्रा. देन कंपल्सरी रजिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ रिसिपिएंट. इट इज mandatory that recipient must be a registered person, only then he will be held liable. So a small business that usually doesn't cross the threshold must still register if it receives services covered under RCM. Then key features of reverse charge mechanism part 2. Here is payment must be made in cash. Second, not ITC. That is, the recipient has to pay GST under RCM using cash through the electronic cash ledger. Means कि recipient जो है cash पे payment कर रहे हैं, they cannot use ITC at the time of payment. Payment के time वो ITC claim नहीं कर सकते जब वो payment कर रहे हैं. But ITC का benefit जो है they can claim later on after making cash payment. सेल्फ इनवॉइसिंग परचेजेस फ्रॉम अनरजिस्टर्ड सप्लायर. कोई भी अगर सप्लायर है जो अनरजिस्टर्ड है, अगर वो सर्विसेज रिसीव कर रहा है, देन इट इज मैंडेटरी फॉर हिम so that he have to first of all draw self invoice, that is invoice in his own favor, and only then after making payment to the supplier, then he has to deposit the GST amount to the government. So a registered contractor buys material from small village shopkeeper which is unregistered. The contractor must issue a self invoice and pay GST invoice and pay GST under RCM. Then compliance responsibility on recipient. So all the compliance requirement formalities, that is maintaining of records, self invoicing, payment of GST to government, all falls on the recipient. Then एक सिंपल सा कंसेप्ट क्लियर करने के लिए इसको इंक्लूड करा गया है, दैट इज फॉरवर्ड चार्ज, जो नॉर्मल जीएसटी के अंदर होती है, जहाँ पे रिसिपिएंट इज नॉट लायबल टू पे जीएसटी बट द पर्सन हु इज सप्लाइंग गुड. जनरली यही होता है, जो इनकम अर्न करेगा उसी की लायबिलिटी होगी कि गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स पे करे, बट एंड दैट सिस्टम इज कॉल्ड फॉरवर्ड चार्ज. बट रिवर्स चार्ज मीन्स व्हेन द लायबिलिटी इज शिफ्टेड अपॉन द रिसिपिएंट. ठीक है, सो इट मीन्स अगर सप्लायर कलेक्ट करेगा, इस केस में सप्लायर सारा काम करता है, जीएसटी बायर से कलेक्ट करता है, गवर्नमेंट को भी जीएसटी सप्लायर डिपॉजिट करवाता है, सप्लायर ही इशू करता है टैक्स इनवॉइस, सप्लायर ही रिटर्न्स फाइल करता है, एंड बायर कैन क्लेम ओनली आईटीसी लेटर ऑन व्हेन ही इज फर्दर सप्लाइंग द गुड्स. बट इन रिवर्स चार्ज एवरीथिंग इज डन बाय द buyer. That is, buyer has to pay GST to government. He has to make self invoice. Buyer has additional compliance responsibilities. Buyer pays GST in cash first and then claims ITC. Then is the merits. There are some benefits of the system. That is, unorganized sector also comes within the tax net. Now, those sectors which were considered as unorganized, वो भी अब tax के net में आ गए हैं. That is, they also have to pay tax. that is many unorganized sectors like BD manufacturing, raw cotton farming, small transport operators often remain outside GST. So RCM ensures that when they sell to registered entities, taxes will collected ताकि government का revenue कम ना हो. Then provides timely and assured revenue to the government because government gets GST directly from the registered and financially stable businesses क्योंकि unorganized से organized के पास जा रहा है and organized are the financially stable businesses, so they have to pay tax at that proper time, and it leads to increased revenue to government. Then reduces tax evasion and revenue leakage because large and unorganized sectors are responsible for paying GST. There is less scope for the seller to hide the sales. ठीक है, क्योंकि अगर सेलर जो है बेच रहा है अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड है पर जो रिसिपिएंट है वो ऑर्गेनाइज्ड है तो उसको टैक्स पे करना ही पड़ेगा. सो देयर विल बी लेस टैक्स इवेजन. इंक्रीज ट्रांसपेरेंसी इन द सिस्टम. कोई भी ट्रांजेक्शन हो रही है, the proper entries will be there and it will lead to, we can easily track all the transactions and there will be greater transparency. But there are some limitations that the whole compliance burden is shifted on the recipient of the services or goods. So they have to prepare self invoice, they have to identify the RCM transaction, they have to make payments. Along with that, they have to file additional details in returns. So the whole burden is shifted upon recipient instead of the supplier. Complexity of self invoicing, there are many complexities, various formalities are there. Okay, so small businesses, if they have to get themselves registered because RCM applies on them, then they have to fulfill all those complex requirements also. Then immediate cash outflow required because ITC can be claimed later on. एक बार तो recipient को payment करनी ही पड़ेगी, ITC को तो benefit वो बाद में demand कर सकते हैं ना. तो initially there is more cash flow than in the earlier system. Then higher risk of errors and penalties क्योंकि misidentified transactions हो सकती हैं. Sometimes the person may forget to issue self invoice or he can pay late, which may attract penalties, interest, notices from GST authorities हो सकता है. And then is obviously it will have the impact on the working capital because cash flow के ऊपर बहुत फर्क पड़ेगा क्योंकि हमारी तरफ से पेमेंट चली जाएगी. ठीक है, हमें आईटीसी का बेनिफिट लेटर ऑन मिलेगा. सो द इमीडिएट कैश आउटफ्लो रिक्वायरमेंट्स अंडर आरसीएम कैन स्ट्रेन द वर्किंग कैपिटल especially for small businesses that operate with a tight margin and limited reserves. Then is there are some compliance challenges. आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ एप्लीकेबल ट्रांजेक्शन्स, कौन सी ट्रांजेक्शन आरसीएम में आती हैं, ये प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है. सेल्फ इनवॉइसिंग की रिक्वायरमेंट हो सकती है. सेपरेट रिकॉर्ड मेंटेन करने पड़ सकते हैं कि कौन से आरसीएम के गुड्स हैं उनके ऊपर कितना रेट लगना है. देन टाइमली पेमेंट करनी पड़ती है बिकॉज दे आर ऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर्स. देन आईटीसी क्लेमिंग प्रोसेस इज ऑल्सो लेंदी बिकॉज द अमाउंट इज क्रेडिटेड इन द अकाउंट लेटर ऑन. देन सम प्रैक्टिकल एग्जांपल्स जो हमने पहले भी डिस्कस किए हैं, लाइक कोई टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री है, कोई डायरेक्टर की रेम्यूनरेशन है, सिक्योरिटी सर्विसेज है, तो इन सभी केसेस में द पर्सन हु इज रिसिपिएंट ऑफ आइदर गुड्स और सर्विसेज, इन बोथ दीज केसेस दे आर रिक्वायर्ड टू पे टैक्स, नॉट द सप्लायर. So we can conclude that this system is that the system that is RCM is very beneficial for government, business and for the economy because government का tax base increase हो जाएगा, timely revenue collection होगा, tax evasion कम होगा, transparency बढ़ेगी. business के लिए level playing field हो गई, unfair competition नहीं होगा, contribution of more formalized economy होगी, and then economy strengthen होगी, tax compliance अच्छा होगा, better data for economic planning and support the overall GST framework को support मिलेगी. So with this concept is over. We will meet in the next video. Thank you.